The moment Sarah Chen pressed her fingers against the unconscious old man's neck and felt his fading pulse, she had no idea she was touching the father who had abandoned her 32 years ago. His weathered face, covered in dirt and desperation, held no resemblance to the photograph she had burned on her 18th birthday, the only image she'd ever had of the man who left her mother pregnant and alone in a cold Chicago winter. Sarah, a 32-year-old trauma nurse with warm olive skin, gentle brown eyes, and her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, was still wearing her teal hospital scrubs when she found him collapsed behind the grocery store dumpster. The stakes couldn't have been clearer. This man had minutes to live, his lips turning blue, his breathing shallow and rattled. But what she didn't know, what would shatter everything she believed about her past, was the faded photograph tucked in his jacket pocket. A photograph of a young woman holding a newborn baby. A photograph of her mother. A photograph of her. Why did this dying stranger carry her baby picture next to his heart? "Sir, can you hear me?" Sarah knelt on the wet pavement, ignoring the rain soaking through her scrubs. December in Seattle was unforgiving, and this man, who appeared to be in his late 60s, with deep wrinkles carved into his light brown skin and silver-gray hair matted against his forehead, had clearly been living on these streets for months. His clothes told the story, a threadbare army jacket with patches so faded she could barely make out the insignia, worn jeans held together by hope and habit, and boots with holes that let in every drop of rain. His eyes fluttered open, deep brown eyes that seemed somehow familiar, though Sarah couldn't place why. "Let me go," he whispered, his voice cracking like autumn leaves. "I've been waiting to die for a long time." Something in those words pierced Sarah's professional armor. She had seen countless patients give up, had watched the light leave eyes that no longer wanted to see another sunrise. But this man's surrender felt different. Personal. As if he wasn't just giving up on life, but punishing himself for something unforgivable. "I won't allow you to die," she said firmly, the words leaving her mouth before she could stop them. "Not today. Not on my watch." She called 911, cradling his head in her lap while they waited. His fever was dangerously high, his body trembling with chills that had nothing to do with the December rain. Pneumonia, she suspected. Maybe worse. When the ambulance arrived, she found herself climbing in beside him, holding his cold hand as if letting go would mean losing something precious she couldn't yet name. At the hospital, Sarah pulled strings she didn't know she had. She advocated for tests, demanded attention from overworked doctors, and refused to leave his bedside even when her shift had ended hours ago. Her colleagues exchanged knowing glances. Sarah was always the one who got too attached, who couldn't separate her heart from her healing hands. "He has no identification," the administrator told her. "No insurance. No emergency contacts. We can stabilize him, but after that." "He's coming home with me," Sarah interrupted, surprising even herself. Her boyfriend Marcus had always said her compassion would be her downfall. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was foolish to bring a stranger into her small apartment, to set up the spare bedroom with clean sheets and warm blankets, to spend her days off nursing a man whose name she didn't even know. But something about him called to her. Something in the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, with a mixture of wonder and grief so profound it made her chest ache. It took 3 days for him to speak more than a few words. 3 days of Sarah spoon-feeding him soup, checking his temperature, and reading aloud from old novels because the silence felt too heavy. On the 4th morning, she found him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Then how did you have this photograph?" David's answer would haunt Sarah's dreams for months to come. 5 years ago, I saw your mother. Pure chance, I was panhandling outside a restaurant downtown, and she walked right past me. She was older, but I would have recognized her anywhere. I followed her. I watched her go into an apartment building. And then I saw you." He had seen Sarah helping her mother carry groceries, laughing at something Lynn had said, looking so much like the young woman David had loved that he couldn't breathe. "I couldn't approach her. I was, look at me. He gestured to himself, the years of homelessness carved into his face, his dignity stripped away by poverty and mental illness that had gone untreated for decades. What could I offer her? What could I offer you? I was a ghost haunting a life I could never have. But he had watched. For 5 years, he had watched from a distance, memorizing Sarah's routines, celebrating her victories from the shadows, mourning when Lynn had gotten sick. He had stood at the back of Lynn's funeral, hidden behind a tree, sobbing for the woman he had never stopped loving. The photograph, Sarah pressed. How? Your mother dropped it. Outside the hospital, during one of her treatments. I picked it up and I never let it go. David met Sarah's eyes with a directness that felt like staring into a mirror. I've watched you become everything I dreamed you would be. Strong. Kind. Brave enough to save a dying man who didn't deserve saving. Sarah wanted to hate him. For years, hatred had been easier than grief, and she had wrapped herself in that hatred like armor. But looking at this broken man, her father, she felt the anger dissolving, replaced by a sorrow so vast she couldn't see its edges. Why didn't you ever come forward? Why didn't you tell me who you were? Because I believed the lie, David whispered. I believed I had destroyed everything I loved. And then, when I saw you were alive, I thought you were better off not knowing. Better off believing whatever story your mother told you than knowing the truth about your failure of a father. Sarah reached out and took his hand. It was rough with calluses, cold despite the warm room, but it fit against hers like a key sliding into a lock. You're not a failure. The system failed you. Your commanding officer failed you. Even my mother. She stopped, the realization cutting deep. She must have believed them too. She must have thought you abandoned us. They cried together then, father and daughter, strangers and family, two people separated by lies and reunited by a miracle neither of them deserved. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and David began the slow work of rebuilding what had been stolen from them. It wasn't easy. There were days when Sarah's anger surged back, when she couldn't look at David without thinking of every school play he'd missed, every father-daughter dance she'd attended alone, every birthday wish she'd wasted on a man she thought didn't care. But there were also moments of unexpected grace. David helping Sarah cook her mother's recipes, his hands remembering ingredients his mind had forgotten. Sarah showing David photographs of her childhood, narrating the story he had missed. They filled in each other's gaps, two incomplete puzzles finally finding their missing pieces. Marcus, Sarah's boyfriend of 3 years, struggled with the change. You're different now, he said one evening, watching Sarah help David with his physical therapy exercises. It's like you're obsessed with this man. He's my father, Sarah replied simply. He's a stranger who showed up and disrupted your entire life. But Marcus couldn't understand. He had grown up with both parents, had never known the ache of an empty chair at the dinner table. He had never spent childhood nights wondering if he was the reason his father had left. The tension built until it finally exploded one night in February. Marcus issued an ultimatum, it's me or him. I can't share you with this ghost anymore. Sarah didn't hesitate. Then I choose him. She watched Marcus leave, feeling something between relief and grief. But when she turned back to find David standing in the hallway, tears in his eyes, she knew she had made the right choice. You didn't have to do that, David said. Yes, I did. I spent 32 years without you. I'm not losing you again. But the very next morning, Sarah discovered a medical file in David's belongings, one that revealed a devastating truth he had been hiding since the day she brought him home. The diagnosis was terminal. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, discovered during David's hospital stay but somehow buried in paperwork Sarah hadn't seen. He had known since that first night that he was dying. He had known and said nothing. How long? Sarah demanded, the medical file shaking in her hands. David wouldn't meet her eyes. 4 months. Maybe 5 if the treatment works. But I'm not doing treatment. What do you mean you're not doing treatment? You have to fight this. Sarah's voice rose to a scream, all her medical training abandoning her as pure, primal fear took over. You can't just give up. I'm not giving up, David said quietly. I'm letting go. There's a difference. But Sarah refused to accept it. She scheduled appointments with oncologists, researched clinical trials, spent hours online looking for miracles. She would not allow this man, this father she had only just found, to slip away without a fight. The next 3 months were the most precious of Sarah's life. She took a leave of absence from the hospital, cashing in every vacation day and sick day she had accumulated over 8 years. She moved David into her bedroom, taking the couch for herself so she could hear him if he needed her in the night. They talked for hours, filling in 3 decades of lost time. David told her about his childhood in San Francisco, about his mother who made the best dumplings on the West Coast, about the grandfather who taught him to play chess. He told her about the war, carefully, gently, leaving out the worst parts but helping her understand the wounds that had shaped him. I want you to know something, David said one afternoon in March, his voice weaker now but his eyes still bright. Your mother never stopped loving me. I know that now. Whatever her family told both of us, it was lies designed to separate us. But love like what we had, it doesn't die. It just waits. Sarah held his hand, watching the spring rain streak down the windows. How can you be sure she loved you? David smiled, reaching under his pillow to pull out a small box. Inside was a ring, simple gold band with a tiny diamond, clearly decades old. I went back to our apartment after the funeral, he admitted. The new tenants let me in. I don't know why, but I checked the floorboard in the closet. It was our hiding spot, back when we were young and dramatic and thought we needed hiding spots. He laughed softly at the memory. This was there. The ring I gave her when I proposed. She kept it, Sarah. For 32 years, she kept it. Sarah took the ring with trembling fingers. She had helped clean out her mother's apartment after the funeral and had never known about this hiding spot, never known about this ring. There was a note, too, David continued, producing a folded piece of paper so old it was falling apart at the creases. She wrote it when she was dying. I think she knew I'd come looking. Somehow, she knew. Sarah unfolded the paper carefully, her mother's familiar handwriting swimming through her tears. My dearest David. Asterisk if you're reading this, then you finally came home. I'm sorry I believed them. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder to find the truth. I'm sorry for all the years our daughter grew up thinking you didn't want her, asterisk. Asterisk but David, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Every night, I went to sleep remembering your smile. Every morning, I woke up hoping maybe today would be the day you'd return, asterisk. Asterisk take care of our Sarah. She has your eyes and your stubborn heart. She will be angry at first, but she will forgive you. She has my capacity for love, and love always wins in the end, asterisk. Forever yours. Lynn. Sarah couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Her mother had known. Her mother had left this message like a message in a bottle, trusting the ocean of fate to deliver it. The cherry blossoms were blooming when David took his final breath. Sarah was holding his hand, just as she had promised she would be. His last words were not profound or poetic, they were simple, the way truths usually are. Thank you for saving me, he whispered. Not from death. From dying alone. From dying unloved. From dying unknown. Sarah pressed her forehead to his, tears falling onto his peaceful face. Thank you for coming back to me. He smiled, the same smile she had seen in old photographs of him as a young man, the smile that had made her mother fall in love. And then he was gone, finally free to reunite with Lynn, finally able to explain everything, finally home. Sarah buried David next to her mother, the two headstones side by side after 32 years apart. The inscription she chose was simple, asterisk together at last. Love never dies, asterisk. In the months that followed, Sarah found herself transformed by grief and gratitude in equal measure. She returned to work at the hospital, but something had shifted. She looked at her homeless patients differently now, saw fathers and mothers and children in every weathered face. She started volunteering at shelters, using her medical skills to help those who had fallen through society's cracks. And she wore her mother's ring on a chain around her neck, pressing it against her heart whenever she needed strength. One autumn evening, exactly 1 year after she had found David behind that grocery store, Sarah was walking past the same spot when she saw a young woman huddled against the dumpster. Homeless. Desperate. Alone. Without hesitation, Sarah knelt beside her, feeling the circle complete itself. "Are you okay? Can I help you?" The young woman looked up with eyes that held decades of pain. "Why would you help someone like me?" Sarah smiled, thinking of David, thinking of Lynn, thinking of all the love that had been lost and found across the span of her lifetime. "Because everyone deserves a second chance," she said. "Because I know what it feels like to be abandoned. And because sometimes, the people we save end up saving us." She helped the young woman to her feet, already planning the meals she would cook, the spare room she would prepare, the listening ear she would offer. She didn't know this woman's story, didn't know what twists and turns awaited them. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Love was not about blood or biology or being present for every moment. Love was about showing up when it mattered most, about holding on even when letting go would be easier, about believing in second chances and miracles and the stubborn, beautiful persistence of the human heart. David had taught her that. Lynn had taught her that. And now Sarah would spend the rest of her life teaching others. As she walked home that night with a stranger who would soon become family, Sarah looked up at the stars and whispered to her parents, wherever they were, "I won't allow love to die. Not on my watch. Not ever." And somewhere in the infinite universe, she knew they were listening. She knew they were together. And she knew that their story, a story of loss and redemption, of lies and truth, of death and undying love, would continue through her, rippling outward like light, touching everyone she met. Because that's what love does. It doesn't end. It transforms. It waits. And when we're finally ready to receive it, it rushes in like a tide, filling every empty space, healing every wound, reminding us that we were never truly alone. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the people you love and the second chances you've been given, please hit like and subscribe for more life-changing stories. Every like helps us share these messages of hope with more people who need them. And remember, someone out there is waiting for you to save them. It might even be yourself.